Well, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rocking Midlife, the podcast. And I am so happy because we have a special guest for you today. And no, it's not another woman, which is interesting because, yes, this show is about supporting women, empowering them to go out and own this season of their lives. But the reality is we women don't live in a bubble. There are men around and men go through things at midlife as well. So today is a particularly powerful session because we're going to be talking to a friend of mine, Greg Ward, who is a male, and we're going to be asking some of his perspectives on how you can be supporting the men in your life in regards to midlife. So welcome, Greg.
Thank you very much indeed, Kat. It's absolutely wonderful to be here. And I love the way you're stressing he is male.
He is male.
I would hope that would be fairly apparent. However, I'm glad
we won't go there.
Exactly. But you make some really good points there in the introduction as well, is that, you know, as individuals, we don't live in bubbles, and we are affected to a great extent by the relationships and the people that we're with, particularly now. This period, this kind of like last 6 weeks, 7 weeks, has been, I think, particularly challenging for everybody as everyone has been shuffling to redefine their social roles and where they fit in a hierarchy, particularly if you've gone to a working from home situation.
Absolutely. So I should just cut across you there. Sorry, Greg. For people who are listening to this recording or watching the YouTube video down the track, Greg and I live in Auckland and we're both currently in lockdown. So it's in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis happening and we're literally in our little bubbles in our homes, working from our own little home studios. So go on, Greg. Sorry.
But yeah, thank you very much for clarifying that as well. Yes, these are, we think we're doing them in the immediacy, but of course they are for posterity. That's
absolutely
the beauty of video. So we have to redefine social roles, and that requires a little bit of consideration and introspection for those around you. You talked about midlife, and that's really what this session is about. And my personal experiences as I've reached this stage of my life, and the experiences for the people who are close to me as well, particularly my wife. So I'll take you and give you a little bit of a pot of history of me.
Yep, that's what I was just going to ask, because it'd be really great to hear a little bit of your story. And let me just add in here, before Greg starts telling you about himself, that from my perspective as someone who's known Greg for a few years, Greg is a phenomenal entertainer, speaker and MC. He's actually world renowned for what he does an amazing Elton John tribute show. In fact, he was used here on our national news program recently after Elton got sick. So Greg is an amazing keynote speaker. He shares his story right around the world, inspiring people of all genders to get out and be empowered and live their lives. So yes, Greg, please give us a little bit of your potted history behind the man that we see today.
Excellent stuff. And thank you. Lovely compliments, I have to say. I kind of, I'll get to this in a minute, but I live in the moment. I live here in the present. And so everything that I've done previously is kind of, it's already gone. It's an unusual way of looking at things, I suppose, because all I can do is live now and look towards the future. And that's not to say I'm not the sum total of the experience, in my life to date, but I can't modify that. But I can modify what's going forward.
Yeah.
So a little bit of history. I'm an immigrant to New Zealand. I arrived here at the age of 3. I brought my family with me. I think they were very happy with that. And we grew up in a small country town of Mangatawhiri, which is in New Zealand. It's around,
whereabouts is that in New Zealand?
That is roughly an hour's drive south of Auckland CBD. Heading out towards the little township of Thames. And it's quite famous. There's a ice cream shop there in the shape of a castle.
I know the one.
And so
everyone knows the ice cream shop, don't they?
I helped build that. So I was a 14-year-old bricky's assistant, helping build that.
Wow.
And if you've ever been inside there, it's closed now, I believe, but and hopefully it will reopen. But on the inside of the turrets, there's amazing battle scenes, and my father and brother painted those because they're both incredibly artistically minded. And
wow.
That's what they did for a living for a number of years. So we grew up in this tiny farming community. We weren't farmers, but we lived in there and stayed there until I was about the age of 17. I had a couple of jobs after school. I dropped out of school at the age of 16 and a half and went into work, did a bit of packaging design and sales administration. And at the same time, I was working in bands. I was learning that there was a opportunity to actually make money from music. After that, I joined the army, which seems like a bit of a swerve.
Very different. It's like...
My father had been in the British Army. He'd been there for 6 years. And I had a very strong following in his line and his footsteps. And so I joined the military, ended up in military communications and stayed for 4 years as a professional soldier. Still having a musical bent, actually. I continued to play and ended up as the entertainment manager of the Corporals Club.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is... at this point of my life, I look back and think, that was pretty much ordained. But at the time, it seemed like a massive leadership role. So got out of the army and traveled overseas extensively around Europe. And during that period, I still continued to dabble in music and ended up with a band. We were signed to a British record company.
Oh, how cool. How exciting.
It was amazingly exciting. It was one of those things where there was very little money involved in it, but the experience was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And we played in Covent Garden, which was a incredible experience for us as a band, and we toured around London mainly. But by the stage of it, towards the end of 4 years, I was getting to the point where I really wanted to come back to New Zealand. And I was still doing day jobs. So my day job at that time was working with KPMG in an IT role. And when I arrived back into New Zealand, I was quite interested in the IT field. So I started looking around for IT work. And the easiest thing to do was to move into the accounting side. So I started work with Coopers & Lybrand. I was employed in an IT technical role with them. And I was there for the transition through to PricewaterhouseCoopers as well. But through that period, I was still just finding myself and realizing that the performance area was really where I wanted to be. So I was training in classical voice. I trained as an actor, improviser, and took every opportunity to get on a stage. And
fantastic.
You know what this is like, Kat.
Yep, I do.
You've got the same background in terms of musicality. And for our viewers and listeners, we've had a wonderful opportunity, Kat and I, just a couple of months ago, actually, to play together for the first time with Kat on sax, myself on keys, and we had a wonderful time. So we're looking forward to reprising
doing that again. Yeah,
absolutely, at some point in the future.
Yeah.
So the process for me then was I needed to get into the performance side, and I just couldn't do any more work in the corporate sector. It just felt completely stifled.
Yeah, I know that feeling, that balance between the mathematical, analytical side of work, and you've got this creative side of you. And it's a juggle, and you can kind of do them both for a while, because I've done that in the teaching realm, being the administrator and the teacher and the lecturer and that side of it. But then you've got this creative side that wants to create things and perform, and it's a real tension, isn't it?
It really is, because you feel stifled by it, and also there's a kind of a set of principles around you, things you should be doing.
Yeah, you
should work in a job. This kind of job is what you should work in. You can't possibly make money out of the performance world.
Yeah,
and that's gone. You go back hundreds of years, and you see how artists were sidelined and really marginalized.
And I can imagine that would be even. You'd feel that a bit more as a man too, if you're wanting to have a family and support your family, and this whole concept of get a real job, son. How are you going to support your wife and children? And I would imagine that would be quite a real sort of weight on you.
I agree. That there is definitely that. We have social expectations, and I know that, and even now, there's a lot of people whose parents, as kids, are saying to them, you've got to get a backstop. It's like, no, you don't have to get a backstop. You have to be passionate about what you do and be prudent with what you do. But the world is your oyster. Whatever you want to achieve, you'll achieve if you focus hard enough on it and break it down into its small steps to achieve things. And I didn't have that experience as a kid to be told this, and so I just kept hammering away at, I've got to have a real job. And so I had a lot of real jobs, and ended up leaving the corporate world. 1998, I left the corporate world for the last time, and that was it. I have not gone back since.
Wow.
Started a business, and that business began to grow over the course of sort of 2 or 3 years. But of course, I was not well versed in how to run a business. I could do the job, and of course, I was building a events company where I was everything: the chief cook and bottle washer. I was at the front. I was doing the admin, the event management, the performance, and everything. And realized that the performing part was really where I excelled. That was being on the stage.
Yeah.
But my bookkeeping was very poor. And like most young businesses, I ended up getting into some rather large strife with the Inland Revenue Department.
Oh, gosh.
Because I wasn't paying tax.
Yeah.
And I can say that quite comfortably right now. And it was a very challenging situation because it also came to a head, I should say, at the point where I met my wife. And I was, pretty flash out on the town with a lot of money. And of course, it wasn't my money; it was the tax department's money.
Oh gosh!
And eventually, I had to come clean and say, I was in this really terrible financial position, and the tax department were trying to. It actually phoned me to say we would rather bankrupt you than have you in business and shut you down.
Oh, serious!
It was a very, very serious point, and touch on
that's
that.
Frightening.
It was incredibly frightening, and it was frightening because it was. I'll touch on the mental health side of things because I've had mental health issues my entire life. Really high highs, very low lows, and trying to essentially self-manage this over the whole course of my life. And that was one of the extremely low points of my life. And I recall sitting outside our house after receiving this phone call in the car, beating at the steering wheel in tears, really not knowing what to do. And, thoughts of suicide are really uppermost in your mind because you don't know how to handle these situations. And as a man, it's not something that it was seen as being anything to talk about, right?
Yeah. So fast forward a little bit to midlife.
Yes.
Taking all that experience and everything that you'd been through, and also with the mental health issues behind that you were dealing with, what happened? I know that 2018 was quite a landmark type year for you. So how did this all culminate? All this story, this mental health, what happened in 2018 to shape you at midlife?
Well, in 2018, in May of 2018, I found myself at a conference in Melbourne, and I had a suicide attempt. Oh. And this was a series of events. This didn't happen in isolation. This has been a series of events leading through to this, and generally just not looking after myself, not giving myself the attention that I deserved and needed, and not seeking the help that I was desperately requiring. And ironically, it was at a conference with a theme, I should say, of performance, diversity, and well-being.
Oh, goodness.
And the challenge with that was, as an MC, my whole persona is about you. Mm-hmm. How can I help you? So for a client, it's like, I always picture this. I'm cradling my hands in front of me and I'm like offering myself to them to say, whatever you need, I will be there for you. So you can imagine all of this energy going out, and I'm emptying my bucket constantly, but I'm not refilling it.
Yeah.
And so I end up doing a great deal of business to reach this point. But on this particular conference, that very next morning, the conference convener asked me if I would speak at the end of the conference to join him on stage to support him in speaking about an element of anxiety that he'd had. And so he said, I've got a half-hour slot. I'm only going to speak for 15 minutes. Can you speak for 15 minutes on the subject of well-being?
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And I'm in crisis. And the only thing I can say to him is, of course I will, because that's what I do. I'm an MC. I'm going to give him everything I can.
Yeah.
So I decided I'd tell a true story, but pretty well jokey, fabricated kind of thing. And then I spent the next 2 days in crisis, wondering what I'm going to do, but still fulfilling the job. Wonderful facade, beautifully crafted. Just you wouldn't know. I consider myself one of the hidden.
Yeah.
And this is I'm not alone in this. There are so many of us, particularly here at this age, where as men, we've reached this point where we are providing for our families. We have mortgages. We have significant responsibilities. We may be business owners, and we are seen to be leaders And as a consequence, we believe that as a leader, you have to have a wall.
You have to have it all together, don't you?
You've got to show, you've got to lead with determination. And of course, showing weakness is
it's just not right, is it?
Kingdom, we know that if a lion shows weakness, he's suddenly deposed.
Yeah.
We're not animals. We're reasoning beings, and we have the ability to effectively manage how we feel and our moods and how we are perceived by our own staff and teams and family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to the end of this piece and you get on stage and the convener speaks and he tells this amazing story of himself overcoming this element of anxiety after a near drowning experience. And it's something he fixed it. And at the same time, he didn't tell his family about it. He didn't tell them that he was taking steps to achieve this, and he had them in the room. He'd invited them along to the close so that he could say from the stage to everybody and to his family, "This is what's been happening for me, and this is what I've done about it." And it was amazing. And I've got goosebumps here in the room now as I can see him plain as day. But I realized that my little jokey story wasn't going to cut it at that point. And so with a lot of trepidation, I stood on that stage and I started to speak for the very first time about how I felt, what it was like for me going through this process about long nights in hotel rooms, lots of alcohol, half cut by 2 o'clock in the morning, waking up at 4, again, put the facade on, help me go. How can I help you? How can I support you? Very unhealthy, not looking after myself in an exercise point of view with food, nutrition, all those kind of things. And again, relationship basis as well, not looking after myself with my wife, with my kids, everything. So everything's out of kilter. Then I told the story on stage. I walk off stage, and I had a wonderful reception from the audience as well. And that was a wonderful, comforting thing. But I'm still in this crisis point. But I had somebody walk up behind me, and I felt somebody touch my arm, and I turned, and they said to me, "Thank you for saying that. I thought I was the only one."
Wow.
So that moment was the catalyst.
Yeah.
And I realized then that by actually revealing my truth, I had the power to affect people positively.
Yeah.
And I had no concept of that. You don't think that you have until you've gone through that process.
Yeah.
So the next 6 months were a challenging time because it was me coming to terms with myself. Alcohol no longer factors in my life. That is something I've just decided. It's not a performance enhancer. Is how I viewed it. But I would never drink during an event in terms of the actual event. It was always afterwards. But my position is still the same. It's not a performance enhancer. But the beautiful thing was, towards the end of that year, my wife turned to me one day out of the blue and she said, "Greg, you feel the lightest I've sensed it of you for at least 10 years.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That moment was also a realization moment about what my wife has had to endure.
Yeah.
And it's really easy as a man, you've got this laser focus on doing all sorts of things, to actually not think about the effect that your own situation and behaviors and how you travel through the world has on those around you.
Well, you think you've got it all together and you don't think that other people will know. Yeah.
And that's the thing about the facade. The facade thing is, it's really easy to fool people who don't know you intimately.
Yeah.
But people who do know intimately, you intimately, know there is something there. They don't necessarily know what.
Yeah.
But they know that there is something there. And so it's incumbent on us as men to be sharing, to actually open up.
Yeah,
and talk
that's so
about
good.
The challenges that we have. And I know that your focus is from a female perspective in that rocking your midlife elements. And it's a kind of a hard challenge for me as a man to go, how can I provide something for our partners, our women in the world, because this is something that's very much individual for each man to be able to go, who am I? how am I running through the world, and does that
Yeah.
does that fit with my own ethics, with my morals, with the way I approach life, and how am I affecting those around me?
Yeah, I think that's really cool. But bringing it back, even for the women who are listening to this, what do they need to look out for? What if their partner is going through the same feelings, where, you know, potentially is suicidal? What do they need to look out for, and how can they support the men in their lives?
There's a series of recognized steps. Now, I'll preface this: I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a counselor. I had no training in these areas.
Fully understand. Yeah,
I'm a layperson, and for me, I can talk about my own personal experiences in this realm, and I can offer what works for me from a strategy standpoint as well. But I also have since then gone into training around suicide awareness. I'm currently working with Mates in Construction. And
cool. Yes,
I'm offering my support to them.
Do you want to just explain what that is for any international listeners? Yeah.
Absolutely. So Mates in Construction is an organisation designed as a suicide prevention and a mental health awareness organisation, particularly for the construction industry. And for those who are joining us here, the construction industry worldwide has the highest rate of suicide of any profession around. Now, it used to be thought that forestry was the major area, but it's not. It's the construction area.
Wow.
And also in terms of suicidal ideation, the youth area is most prevalent, 16 to 24 men have the highest rate of suicide, but the second highest rate is men 44 to 49.
Yeah, that's crazy. Midlife men.
Absolutely, midlife men. And that's that culmination. And often that area has an element of relationship challenge. It has an area of financial challenge, and often leadership and a culmination of who am I and what am I and where am I in the world, because you've reached that point where a lot of the things have been fulfilled. You've got a lot of the processes in place. You might have your mortgages, and you've got a house. You're providing for kids, and those kids are probably mid-teen.
Which is stressful in itself, that age. Yeah,
that's right. And then remembering that relationships don't stay static; they morph.
That's right.
If you stay static in a relationship, then somebody else is morphing in their relationship. You end up with a discord. Yeah. So it's that piece of being able to look outside of yourself as well. And as men, we tend to get introspective, and it's always this circular thinking. So there's got to be a break in that circular thinking.
Yeah.
So the Mates in Construction piece is about how can you identify someone who's having challenges and then have a conversation with them about that. Very much like in the Australian context, are you okay as an organization? To be able to say, let's have an are you okay conversation, and let's delve into that. And this is, you know, from a fortuitous standpoint, someone contacted me yesterday evening to say, I'm having a problem with a team member. I believe they've got some significant mental health issues. Can you help? What can you do? And I said exactly the same thing. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. But here are some.
But from my experience, and
absolutely places you can go.
Yeah.
And I did a suicide first aid course, and that course was with St. John, New Zealand.
Right.
And there are a wide range of providers who do these, and they're really valuable to go on. This was a one-day course. One of the things that they talk about, firstly, is protect yourself. So if you're in a position and you're trying to support other people, is this. Firstly, it's like the old Hippocratic
oxygen mask on first.
First, do no harm. But firstly, make sure that you're safe before you go into that situation. Very much like physical first aid, it's the same thing from a mental first aid point of view.
Yeah, because otherwise you'll take on the emotion and trigger you. Yeah.
And from that process then to actually ask the question. And this is where people find this quite challenging, is to ask the individual, have they contemplated suicide? You cannot force somebody into suicide or create a suicidal situation by asking that question.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to ask these questions, you've got to take the time to listen to the answer.
That's right.
And be prepared that this is going to take a significant amount of time. This isn't something
it could be awkward. It could be uncomfortable. It's
And the only way that you get better at anything is by practicing, by actually doing it, by giving it a go and see how it feels. So it might be a situation where you can catch up with friends and say, let's practice this because we've got people we want to support. How can we do this? Obviously make sure that they're safe first. They're not going through the same processes. But it is about having those conversations and understanding that if you see somebody who is in imminent danger of hurting themselves or somebody else, then dialing your emergency services is the first point.
Right.
Immediately. Don't think about it. Don't go into great depth. Protect them, protect yourself, and protect others. If they're in crisis, then connecting with the organisations that can provide you with support, such as in New Zealand, it's the Mental Health Foundation. We've got the mental health line 1737. There's a text number and a call number that you can dial from any phone, and that will connect you with a trained counsellor immediately with them.
Oh, that's good.
So that's a really good resource to have. And for the mates in construction, so if you are in the construction industry, 0800 111 315 is the number. So that's
good. We'll put all those numbers in underneath this too when we post it in the notes. Yeah.
So there's lots of things. Lifeline. There is Beyond Blue in the Australian side of things, as well as the REOK Foundation. There are a lot of services, and it's best to actually find these things out before you need them.
Yeah.
To ensure that you've got them to hand, and remembering that if we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a process of going out and finding that information. Sometimes also we don't know what we do know. We're pretty good at gathering information, but there's often times when, Kat, when we forget what we actually already know.
That's right.
And we don't trust ourselves.
Yeah.
As humans, and I said we're not animals anymore. We still are animals to a great extent, and we've got that intuition because it's a safety mechanism that we have. The hindbrain kicks in to go,
that's right.
Something's not right there. No, it's not right because the human brain is.
So that's something as women, as partners, as mothers, as sisters, that we need to be listening to that when we get that little voice about the man in our life, to act on that, to ask the questions, to not just go, oh no, he'll be right.
It's absolutely right. It's very easy to gloss over because it means then we don't have to take responsibility for it. We don't have to feel uncomfortable in that situation. But it's a process of it's a bit of a cliche these days, but getting comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And experience and trying to get through that experience so that you can help and support somebody else.
Yeah.
So
what you're saying basically is, for women listening to this, midlife is also a season of change and rethinking and reinvention for the men and not just for the women. And with that, can combine that with mental illness, and it can be a downward spiral in that change. So how do you see midlife now? Has it been like, from that point, from that happening to you, you've been able to find something good out of that, haven't you?
Oh, completely. It completely changed how I viewed myself. And that was, you say, that little catalytic moment for me was the start of something quite powerful. And interestingly, about 3 months after the piece, I was at a trade show. I was exhibiting at a trade show. I'm trying to sell my wares as a speaker. And I realized that I could tell this story. And I was still very much in healing mode at that point. But I was quite happy to share this as well. And so I ended up talking with clients or potential clients, and every single one of them was, oh, we need this. Yeah. We need this for our leadership. We need this for our senior management. We need this for those people who hold themselves so strong, and yet they have exactly the same challenges and issues as everybody else. So that, again, reinforced the fact that I've got something here and that I'm comfortable in sharing this so that it can impact on others. So I've crafted, retrained, I should say, as a keynote speaker, and spent a year doing that. So traveled overseas with to Steve and Jane Lowell, and had a phenomenal time in growing and building keynotes, and I continually morph these as well. And I'm engaged by all sorts of different organizations now to come in and speak to them around my mental health journey and elements of strategies as well.
So I love that. I love that you've been able to draw on your experiences as a performer, as well as this crisis in your life, and you've been able to put it all together and using your gifts now in a way that you can help other people, other men in particular, in facing these issues in their lives. And that's just wonderful how it's all come together like that.
Oh, thank you. I feel particularly gratified when actually the best feedback I get is generally although we're not conferencing at the moment, but we will be conferencing, physically conferencing.
Yeah, we will be
down
some
the track,
point, yeah.
is generally late at night, generally towards an end of an event, might be an awards event or might be an end of a conference. Someone will come up to me very quietly and say, hey, I've been following you on LinkedIn, or I've been following you on Facebook, and or I've seen you speak. I just want to let you know that what you said had an impact for either me or for a staff member, or how it's changed how I think about a certain situation. And it's those moments that are so powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's a continuing affirmation that this is working, that this decision to actually stand on stages and open up and
be
go,
vulnerable.
this is who I am, and be vulnerable has worth.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And so people say, oh, look, I've been sharing your story with someone else. And my counter to that is often, that's lovely. It's a really wonderful thing. But I'd really like you to share your story with those individuals as well.
Yeah.
So just jumping back to from a midlife woman perspective, this is an opportunity here to, as much as men, traditionally we don't like talking.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk.
Yeah, that's
true. It's a really valuable tool to sit down and have check-ins. They're not giant, meaningful, deep and meaningfuls. They're, how are we going? How are we tracking? Where are we sitting at the moment? So maybe there's that opportunity to be able to tick in and go, and suggest these to the men in your life, and say, hey, maybe even couch it in a way to say, we need to have a talk.
Yeah.
And so, what do you want to talk about? Nothing at all. Sort of see how you're going. You all good?
Yeah, that's the key. I think I remember from having worked with teenage males when I was a teacher and as a lecturer in their early 20s. You want to have those conversations, you've got to get alongside men and be doing something. You can't do the face-to-face, how are you? It comes out of joint focusing on something else and coming alongside, isn't it? And giving those conversations.
Yep, it really is. And remembering that the people who are the closest to you and that you love the most are your strongest supporters.
Yeah.
And that is the challenge. That's a challenge for men. But at the same time, it's for us to recognize it, and for our partners to support that as well, in the same way that we are supporting our partners.
Okay, so this has been fabulous, and I'm so appreciate you being so open about, what it was a time of crisis in your life. So really, really quickly, 2 points for men, 2 clear-cut points for men here at midlife. What would you say?
Here's me doing my clear-cut moment for men. One of the first point is this: you don't eat an elephant all at once, right? You eat an elephant a bite at a time. Often we find ourselves in a position where we are completely overwhelmed in our situations, in how we're feeling and our emotions, and we don't understand what's happening. You don't have to understand everything. You have to start with one step.
That's brilliant.
One little thing.
So don't get overwhelmed by the enormity of a situation. Just start with the little thing in front of you.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the other aspect that I like to talk about is, and I mentioned it before, is we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's incumbent on us to grow, to search for answers outside of ourselves.
Yeah, I like that.
Encapsulated best by one of a chap who was an amateur philosopher. I was trying to do a fix on a server, and I couldn't do it. But I wasn't wanting to let him know that I couldn't do it, because he was judging me as a time and motion study. And eventually he said to me, Greg, can you fix it? So I told him what the problem was. And he goes, no, I know what the problem is. He says, Greg, can you fix it? So I didn't answer him. And he said, look, Greg, it's easy. Either the answer is inside your head, or it's outside your head. Which is it?
That's
good. I realized at that moment, that's the key. We know if we know it. And we also know if we don't know it. So search for outside. Yeah,
so that's brilliant. Okay, because I'm all about the clear hack. So there's 2 nice clear actions for men. Small bites, and taking confidence in that if you don't have the answers, you know that you can go find those answers. 2 for women who are looking at the midlife men in their lives.
Support, I think, is the overall one. Look at your men. Look at your men and stand back and see what's changing for them.
Yeah.
What changed in them from a week ago? What changed in them from 2 weeks ago? What are they doing differently now that they didn't do before? And this is really easy to gloss over. Very simple to go, just for the sake of harmony, to not make these points. But it's a crucial point, because as men, we're highly unlikely not to do anything about it unless we're clearly shown that we are changing.
Yeah, that's great. Second one?
The second one.
So for the change, I'm imagining with the change, you're looking just for little things too, like if they've been through obvious big changes like work situations, that's always going to trigger something, because men's worth is very tied into what they do as well, isn't it?
That's absolutely correct. It's a really challenging thing, because we have so many different inputs. And expectations that we put on ourselves. And the reality is that no one's putting expectations on ourselves. We are the only people who are doing that. And we always think that we are the only one who's going through this, and the reality is not. The reality is that every single one of us is flawed in some way, and we should take heart in that. And not judge ourselves by other people.
It's actually normal. Okay, second step for women. What's the second thing that women can do at midlife to look after the men in their lives?
To look after the men in their lives is to, similar kind of thing, is to continue to grow, to continue to learn, and two points on this. Live your life.
That's good.
Because this is your life. This is not, you are not the adjunct to the man. This is your opportunity to grow and learn.
Okay, I just think you won all the women over with that line alone there, Greg, just saying. That's great.
We get too often in this position where, the man is supposed to be the head of the household, and literally it's a complete family unit.
It's a partnership,
And we have my family name is Ward. My wife's name is Peak. We put these two together to make Peak Ward, and that's our company, Peak Ward. We don't say Peak Ward, we say Peakwood, going towards the peak. And that is always a analogy for me, because there's a lovely set of lines from a Dan Fogelberg song called "The Higher You Climb," and the structure is, the higher you climb, the more that you see. The more that you see, the less that you know. The less you know, the more that you yearn. The more that you yearn, the higher you climb. So
that's
it's
great.
A beautifully circular motion of growth and knowledge and learning. And that's something that we do as a family. And we often have family hugs. So I've got two kids, my wife and I, we'll come together and we'll just have this big four people.
We used to do that too when they were younger.
It's a wonderful
hard these days getting them all together.
And we call ourselves Team Peakwood.
Oh, lovely.
And that's really the thing, right? So keep growing, be who you are. Keep an eye on the men in your life. Watch for change, but stay true to who you are.
Love it. Oh, that was fantastic, Greg. Oh, wow.
Thanks, mate.
Lots to think about. So we're going to put all those points, all those links that Greg talked about, those resources where, particularly for Kiwis, where you can go and find support in the areas of mental health. We're going to put all of that information in here in the show notes. Greg, thank you so much for being the first man to step up on the Rocking Midlife podcast show. Very brave of you, but so essential, because, yes, I talk to women. Yes, Rocking Midlife is about supporting, encouraging women, empowering women, but we aren't in a bubble. Like I said at the very beginning, I'm so excited. I'm losing my earpiece. We're not in a bubble. We're surrounded by men. We're mothers, we're sisters, we're nieces, we're wives, we're daughters. There are men all around us, and they need to be, just part of this whole midlife journey as well, and understanding them and supporting them and growing with them. And so, fabulous stuff. Thank you again, Greg. Have a fabulous day.
Thank you very much indeed. You too.
Okay, here's to Rocking Midlife, hey?
Hey, I'm with you.
Excellent. Thank you.